You want to help me? Come help me. She has a stain too, but it's also from Sonic. So mine leaked on my finger. Hers just fell off of the sushi.
We can't help if you're messy either.
Yeah.
I know.
Obviously not too much of a miss in the house, right? So, okay. First we're going to just sing it through. You want to sing?
I sort of remember.
Okay. We're going to sing it through, and then we're going to teach you the actions when you learn too. But it's 12 men went to spy on Canaan. Anybody ever heard this? 10. Okay, good. Then you can come on up. You can learn the hand signs now. Okay, put up your finger. 10.
Very little.
We're bad. And 2. We're good. Okay. What did they do when they went to Canaan? 10. We're bad. And 2. We're good. Okay, you got it so far? Some saw giants big and tall. Some saw God ruled over all. I left something out. That's where that comes in. Some saw giants big and tall. Some saw grapes in clusters fall. Some saw God ruled over all. 10 were bad and 2 were good. Got it? Good. Stand up. Come on, we're having more fun here. Let's go. We'll go through it slow the first time, then we're going to pick it up. Here we go. 12 men went to spy on Canaan, 10 were bad and 2 were good. Sound booth is not excluded from this. Yes! If you're coordinated enough to work the knobs, you can do it, okay? Come on, guys.
Let's go, boys.
What did they do when they went to Canaan? 10 were bad and 2 were good. Some saw giants big and tall. Some saw grapes in clusters fall. Wasn't that fun? Some saw God ruled over all. 10 were bad and 2 were good. Good job. Here we go. 12 men went to spy on Canaan. 10 were bad and 2 were good. What did they do when they went to Canaan? 10 were bad and 2 were good. Some saw giants big and tall. Some saw grapes in clusters fall. Oh, that's nice. Some saw God ruled over all. 10 were bad. One more time. 12 men went to spy on Canaan. 10 were bad and 2 were good. What did they do when they went to Canaan? 10 were bad and 2 were good. What is this? Some saw giants big and tall. Some saw grapes in clusters fall. That's so fun. Some saw God ruled over all. 10 were bad and 2 were good. That is the most fun way to remember that story, isn't it? So 12 men went there. 10 of them came back. Is that picking me up at all? I mean, I do this stuff. Okay, we're good? When they came back, 10 of the 12 said, can't be done. Can't happen. Won't happen. They're too big. Yeah, the grapes are huge, but guys, we're like grasshoppers to them. They're ginormous. That's a word. They're humongous. That's an older word. And they were just, I mean, we can't whoop them. But 2 men. 2 out of 10. So many math people can tell me what that percentage is like that. I can't.
16 2/3.
Thank you. Wow, that's good. That's impressive. That really is. 16 2/3 of the men who were there said, my God's big enough. And if you go back to Numbers 13 and 14, do you remember the response of the people? By the time it was all said and done, by the time that, if you'll pardon me, the church was done arguing, the people of God were done fighting over it, they said, just kill them. Stone them. Now, stoning happens in that part of the world one of 2 ways. Either you go and you stand somebody on the edge of a cliff, okay, and you throw stones at them until they fall over the back of that cliff, and then you throw stones down at them. Big boulders. Or, which is still the method today in some Middle Eastern religions, you bury them up to the neck. You all stand in a circle around them and you throw stones until they don't move anymore. Either way, the outcome wasn't too good. Christ said, leave him alone. And he told Moses, his servant, to tell the people, I said leave him alone. And in essence, God said, the rest of you are so unfaithful, so distrusting. My goodness, we just talked about what God did. He fed them when there was no food. He gave them water when there was no water. He separated oceans on their behalf. He had brought in tribulations and pestilence until they would be set free of the bondage that they lived in. God did unfathomable things on their behalf. And the response of 84% of them was, God's not big enough. In some ways I can't blame them. In some ways I think about my life, or you may think about your life, and you may think, wow, some of the mountains in my life are so big. Some of the giants that I face are so, I look like grasshoppers to them. I'm so small. I'm so insignificant. I'm so unworthy. Whatever your excuse might be. And before I go on about this first group, I want to remind you, I want to let you know what happened as a result of that 84% that weren't faithful to a big God. After everything they had seen, after everything they had experienced, they said, God's not big enough. And God's response was, you're not getting what I promised you. Not now. None of you will see this, except Joshua and Caleb. None of you will cross over the Jordan River, into the promised land. The unfaithfulness of those who were afraid of God's power. The unfaithfulness of those who were afraid of the changes that, you know what, when they got into the promised land, it all looked different than anything that they had ever experienced in their life. Just like when we, the church, have to change to be relevant to the society that is around us. And that's more than just learning to sing songs that are more up-tempo and worship songs. It's about how we react to the community. It's about overcoming what their perception of the church is, that we brought about, mostly. I candidated at a church not far from here one time, and I asked them, I said, what's the most, for lack of better words, because I don't like this word used in conjunction with the church, it makes it sound like a race or something, or a competition. So what's the most successful church in this community? They told me the name of it was, ABC Church. What are they doing? It's helping them reach into the community. And 3 of the board members sat there and said, I don't know. I was appalled. Why don't you know? If they're making an impact on the kingdom of God, why don't you want to know what's working in your community? This is clear off the text, but I'm going to share it with you. I'm going to let you fill in the blanks of the words. Tony Campolo, a very well-known pastor, in one of his most famous sermons, stepped up in front of a congregation of hundreds or thousands one Sunday, and as he walked up to the pulpit, I think you can probably still find it on YouTube, and he said something to this effect. This is not an exact quote, but it will carry the intent of Tony Campolo's message. And he said, this morning in the time that it takes me to preach this message, 18,000 people will die and go to hell. And most of you don't give a about it. And his word was real graphic. And he went on and he said, and you know what's even worse? Most of you sitting here today are more concerned that a pastor said that word from the pulpit than you are that 18,000 people are going to go to hell before the end of this message. Change is hard. And we can't be content or satisfied with the status quo or how we've always done things or how it used to look. The world has changed around us. And outside of godliness, outside of Christ, change is the only constant there is. Even in the church. If you don't believe me, read church history. We do not look like the church did 200-300 years ago, folks. And we don't lower the standards, and we don't change the words, but it's okay for us to say, it's not too big, the mountain's not too great, it's doable with God. But because 84% said, my God's not big enough, God said, then you're not crossing the Jordan. And for the next 40 years, until all of them but Joshua and Caleb passed away, they wandered in the desert. Anybody feel like they're wandering in the desert? Maybe there's a reason. Maybe it's where you are in your faithfulness, or lack thereof. What we stand up for and believe or not believe doesn't just impact us. Dr. Weeder, in one of his classes, shared a phrase with me that I've never forgotten. And he said, we never sin in a vacuum. Ask him to preach that message sometime. We never sin in a vacuum. The contemporary idea that what I do only hurts me doesn't fit with the Bible that we read. We impact everybody around us, so we either impact them for the kingdom or we push them away. That's believers. Group 2. We'll talk about the other two guys for a moment. I want to go back to one for just 1 second. Let me ask you this. Not just talking about the faithlessness that pushed them out in the desert, but let me ask you about your personal trust and your belief and how big your God is. To take just a second before we go into the next two guys real briefly and think about what are the mountains in your life? What are the giants in your life? What are the things that are too big for you to handle in your life, that weigh you down, that beat you up, that make you say, it's too much, can't do it? While God is saying, let me give you what I've got. If you'll just trust me. The other two guys, Joshua and Caleb. Only two that were allowed to live to see the promised land. Only two. In the verse that we read today, we'll go back to here in a little bit. Joshua would become the eventual leader of Israel, taking the place of Moses, following in his footsteps. And Caleb will come back to the discussion more fully in just a moment. But what made these two stand out? What made them stand out is that they were willing to not follow the crowd. They were willing to not go along with the faithlessness of others. They were willing to stand up for what God had given them and promised them and directed them to do when it was unpopular. They spoke openly. You can jot down Numbers 13, 14, go back and read that later, that they spoke openly, that the people should follow God, should trust God. And like we said before, the people's response was stone them.